There's a request to share the call-in number, which I will share in the chat here shortly. But I believe after that, we can go ahead and probably get started. Yeah.
Okay. Well, good morning, good evening, everyone. I'm not sure if it's good afternoon for some folks, but good afternoon as well. Thank you for joining us. And my name is Anita Ramachandran. I'm the Executive Director of MicroMentor. I will actually stop sharing my screen so you can see more of my face as I say hello to everyone. I'm joined by Sam Orwig, who's also on the MicroMentor team, and Sandy Bartu and Brian Bent. We've invited Sandy and Brian to join us as guests on this webinar to share their experience as an entrepreneur and a mentor, so we can learn from their what they've been going through and get a better feel for how we can perhaps address the current crisis that we're all facing. I want to thank you for not only being volunteers on MicroMentor, but for taking the time to sign up for the Mentor Task Force as well as attend this webinar. It really does mean a lot to us that you're dedicating your time and you're sharing your expertise with the MicroMentor community. I want to start off by giving you a little bit of background about MicroMentor. I don't think we've had a chance to talk before. MicroMentor is a social enterprise that sits within an international NGO called Mercy Corps. So if you see that name come up here and there, and it's on our website, and you're not sure exactly what that connection is, we sit within a large international NGO. Mercy Corps does development work, humanitarian aid, economic development work is one of the things that the agency does. But MicroMentor sits as a social enterprise within Mercy Corps. And MicroMentor started over 10 years ago to democratize access to social capital. What was during that time in the early 2000s, microfinance was picking up, and access to capital was certainly a conversation about how it needed to be democratized and really decentralized from banks and places where people traditionally were able to access finance. Around the same time, access to social capital, support from a mentor specifically, was rising in research as being very critical for business success. MicroMentor started at that time and has continued to grow. Today, it's probably one of the world's largest business mentoring platforms and communities. And we're the only reason it's surviving and thriving is because of people like you, mentors who are volunteering their time and being a part of this community. And when COVID hit, and one of the biggest impacts outside of the health crisis was a devastating blow to the small business community, those of us in the MicroMentor team really felt a need to step up and do something that was more relevant, urgent, and addressing the needs that we started seeing in the small business community all around us. So part of that was to one, step up and make a bigger commitment. So we've committed to supporting 100,000 businesses. And honestly, we set this big commitment and then are trying to figure out how to actually meet that. But we know that the very first thing to do is to draw on our community, and our mentors are who make what makes MicroMentor work. And so we reached out to you to see how we can make this how we can actually make this happen. So this is the very beginning of our effort to be COVID responsive. And what that means is for us to hear from you, for us to hear from entrepreneurs like Sandy, to understand what would be helpful, how MicroMentor can facilitate this community to be actually connecting with each other and helping businesses overcome or at least face the challenge that we see. So the Mentor Task Force is something that is developing. You're the first batch of the Mentor Task Force. We expect that this will continue to grow. And today's conversation is really to understand, for me to share with you a little bit about how we've thought about it. What does it mean to be on the task force? We'll hear from Sandy. She's a local Portland, Oregon business owner, and I'm based in Portland, Oregon in the United States. Sam also lives in Oregon, but not in Portland. and Brian is in California. So we, we reached out very quickly. All of this has come together really quickly. So we're grateful that Sandy and Brian are sharing their experience with us. So Sandy is going to share a little bit about how COVID has affected her business and potentially what role mentoring could play. So we can hear directly from an entrepreneur whose businesses have been affected, and personally her life as well. And we'll jump into a conversation with Brian about what he's seeing with business owners that are affected by this crisis, what it might feel like from a mentor's perspective. Throughout this conversation, I encourage you and I urge you to please share your thoughts, whatever questions I pose to our guests. They're really meant, if we could, we would open this up and have a full conversation with everybody, but logistically that might be a little harder. So please share your comments in the chat box. And finally, we'll, at the end, we'll try and see if we can actually open this up and make this a real sort of video enabled conversation. If Sam is able to pull that off, we'll certainly do that. So once again, thank you so much for joining us. I want to jump into sharing with you what I believe the Mentor Task Force is, what we hope that the Mentor Task Force can do. So as mentors on the MicroMentor community, you're already aware that primary intervention for MicroMentor is for mentors and entrepreneurs to connect in one-to-one mentoring relationships. That hasn't changed. We expect that the biggest difference we can make as a community is still to continue engaging in those one-to-one connections where you're reaching out or responding to messages and being able to support small businesses. At the moment, there isn't an identification of who was affected by COVID or not, but we expect that all small business owners across the world will be affected in some way, whether it's through vendors or customers or sales, or that they're just literally having to close shop. Whatever the case might be, we do expect that all businesses will be affected by this global pandemic. So we ask that you still continue to engage in those one-to-one relationships. I'll talk a little bit more about, we'll dive into a little bit more about what it might mean to be a mentor in this age. We are seeing specific expertise and requested from our businesses. We expect that, pivoting business models, being able to access financing, financial planning, operational efficiencies, maybe team planning and HR, managing staff and employees at this time. Those seem like they're popping up as the areas where business owners might need specific help. But outside of that, it's still a one-to-one call for more one-on-one connections with entrepreneurs and mentors, between entrepreneurs and mentors. We also know that each of you might have, specific frameworks that you bring to your mentoring style, and all of that is still required and very and really valid and appropriate at this time. We also, for those of you who have experience in managing crisis or any of the topics that I mentioned above, we're soliciting some expert content from you. How to do that and how to engage with us, we'll share with you after this webinar. But if you're willing to write an article, if you're willing to record a video, or do an interview with us at some point, we'd love to solicit the expertise that this community brings and share that more widely. So more almost as a one-to-many style. And this is something that we're starting to explore. In fact, one of our colleagues on the MicroMentor team hosted a one-to-many mentoring webinar last evening for small businesses in St. Martin. I believe that was really well received. So it's certainly something that we're exploring. We want to hear from you. If there are other ways that we should be considering what to do, this is your community. So please, we welcome ideas. But for now, here is the sort of the framework. And what does this mean and what does this look like on the MicroMentor community? I'm just going to quickly share my screen and show you a couple of slides so you're able to see. Maybe, yeah. So for right now on the platform, the difference that you'll see is that since you've signed up to be on the Mentor Task Force, you'll show up on the MicroMentor community with the COVID-19 response badge on your profile. So this would identify you as a response task force member to the larger global MicroMentor small business community, so they know who to go to. You're almost, we're in crisis response mode, and we're seeing you as being our frontline responders. As mentors are joining the community, we expect to keep growing the Mentor Task Force. We do expect that there are a lot of people that are interested in stepping up and doing being of assistance to small business owners. So we don't expect that the onus will lie on 10 mentors or 20 mentors. We expect that group to continue to grow, but we're really appreciative of those of you that have stepped up and said that you'd want to be helping in sort of our first batch. So you'd be recognized as a COVID response mentor on the MicroMentor platform. Outside of that, we ask that you make an additional sort of code of conduct agreement with us, that you please respond to all messages that come your way, even if it is to politely decline because of not being the right fit or the right match, or you don't have the bandwidth to do it. But we do ask that you respond, ask them to reach out to another mentor if it's not the right fit for you. We also ask that you reach out proactively to small businesses, because many entrepreneurs may not be considering reaching out to a mentor as an option at this time. That they may feel hopeless around what their choices are, and mentoring may not be at the forefront. Along a similar vein, we ask that you reach out to your previous connections, and the MicroMentor team will follow up with you and send you who you connected with in the past. So as you feel appropriate, use your judgment around that, but please reach out to your previous connections and check in and see how they're doing. So the ask is simple, but we know that mentoring takes time. It takes a lot of dedication from mentors like you. So we're thankful for that. But as of now, it's a pretty simple few steps. You will show up on the community with the badge. We ask that you take an extra effort to respond to all messages and proactively reach out. We have created a resource page on MicroMentor as part of COVID response. So what the image that you see on the left, which says, the coronavirus small business resources, that page is live and it's already out there. It has some basic information around what we can do for small business owners and what resources are available for mentors. We're working on creating a separate Mentor Task Force resource page, which you see on the right. And that page will go live after we have our conversation. So we're doing a series of webinars. We had one yesterday, we're doing one today, and these two are in English. My colleagues are going to be hosting two sessions or one or two sessions in Spanish, and then we'll also have one in Arabic. These are the three languages in which MicroMentor is available globally. And so we'll be hosting some of these webinars quickly. And as we gather resources and information from you, and we hear from you, we'll update that Mentor Task Force resource page and keep that live. But that should go live probably at the end of today or tomorrow. In there is information around how financing that's available, other resources that are available. We don't expect that MicroMentor is going to be the one-stop shop for all information around COVID or all the grants and resources that are available. But if you hear of anything pertinent in your country that's being made available, please let us know. And we'll try to keep this as up to date as possible. We still want to be focusing on the core of what we do, which is connecting people and mentoring relationships. So with that, I want to, switch gears to talk about the entrepreneurs and the small business owners. We reached out, like we reached out to you, we reached out to our entrepreneurs, and we asked them how our Mentor Task Force can best support your business. And as I mentioned, the responses we got were sort of in the areas that I already talked to you about. Financial support is definitely at the top of the list. Online sales, declining website traffic, and how to, potentially ways that you can bring that back up. and things that you're seeing displayed on the screen around revenue diversification, human resources, communications, these came up as important areas that mentors can help small businesses. But I think one of the areas that we is sort of mixed in with the list, but perhaps should be at the top of this list, is motivation and mental support. We know that entrepreneurs are, have a pretty difficult journey as it is, and then throw in a global pandemic where your business has come to a screeching halt. In addition to all the stresses that we're feeling, whether or not we run a business, perhaps is a perfect recipe for somebody to just have someone to talk to and be able to share their fears and less isolated as they're struggling with business challenges. So that feels like a top of mind need that might be there with small business owners. That said, I think I should stop talking about what we think small businesses need, and that's precisely why we invited one of our entrepreneurs to join us and share her experience about what COVID has done to her business. And I'm really I'm grateful that Sandy, you were willing to come back and join us in this early hour for a webinar. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and invite Sandy to join me in a quick conversation. Hi, Sandy. Good morning.
Hi. Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I'll start again by saying, Sandy is a local entrepreneur here in Portland, Oregon, and I'm going to, we'll have a quick conversation about what it's like, life is like for her in the age of COVID. So, Sandy, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about what businesses do you run right now, and what has it been like for you?
Good morning. My business is primarily a company that I run on the Etsy marketplace, where I sell party decorations and supplies, and I ship those all over the world from my home. I'm the only employee besides my shipping supervisor, who happens to be my dog, and he gets some fringe benefits with that role, mostly getting to nap whenever he wants. When I started this business about 5 years ago, I had spent the first part of my career running and managing hotels and restaurants. And when I started working from home, I found kind of feeling a little bit isolated, especially a person who likes to talk a lot to people and has a customer service kind of energy. And I just love people. In fact, I love the fact that we're on this call and there are people from all over the world, facing this together.
Yeah.
Anyway, a friend of mine said, Sandy, you're home anyway. And he happens to know that I'm a dog lover. He said, why don't you start dog sitting? And I said, oh, that's a terrible idea. But I did it anyway, and turned out to be one of my favorite things that I've done in my life. So that was the beginning of a bed and biscuits pet hotel here in my home. So for many years, I did both party shop and dog sitting. And then I sort of came really right before this crisis, the desire to pivot and use some of the skills that I had in the hospitality industry, and also a passion for food and people. And I started a company which was food tours here in Portland. And then all of a sudden, we have this pandemic, and life as I know it kind of changed overnight. All my reservations for dogs canceled within about a 48-hour period. People stopped ordering, and website traffic dropped by about 95% within 24 hours. And then of course, all of our restaurants and bars have really shuttered for the time being. So where I thought I had three insulated businesses to even a recession, which I kind of anticipated for this year because of our presidential election and whatnot, it turned out that I am not insulated, and that there is just like everyone else, kind of a collective, like, uh-oh, what will be next? So this personally has affected me because there's fear and worry and uncertainty and a shock, I think. And then a general, a concern, not just for business, but for the people I love and for my own well-being and protecting my kind of personal sanity and making sure I don't go crazy looking out my front window, making eye contact with neighbors like a poor puppy. I'm sorry, neighbors. And but the flip side is I know that if we look at the history of our world, that adversity pops up even in painful ways. And it's an opportunity for us to adapt and change and reach out to people who we can lean on and who can lean on us, and take this opportunity to kind of grow and learn and develop different strategies for the future. I know that not every small business, including my own, may make it through this. But I really believe that even if we don't make it, there's something that we gain in this experience, and what it fuels even a brighter future, even if it looks different than what we imagined it to be. So yeah. I think there's a lot of hope.
Well, that's really that's very encouraging to hear you say that, Sandy. And I've obviously I've had the privilege of sort of seeing your entrepreneurial journey in the last few years, and you're certainly a self-made woman. During this time, as you have 3 different businesses, they're all sort of facing interesting challenges and almost debilitating challenges at the moment. How do you see the role of mentoring, and what might prevent you from reaching out to a mentor? So, because for the larger, one of the things that's preoccupying our MicroMentor team is that, we're worried that small business owners are so much in the crisis mode that it might be hard to see that hope. It might be hard to see what's possible now, while so you're sort of dealing with all of the things, not just the business, but the personal, caring for loved ones, taking care of children. There's so many things that people are faced with. What might prevent you from reaching out to a mentor? Because I still strongly believe that a mentor can be helpful, but I know that not everybody's in that place to do that.
Well, I think it's very easy to kind of get caught in the quicksand of feeling fearful and worried. And I think each of us individually, including myself, have to challenge that thought process. And even when we aren't in crisis, one of the most difficult things for me to do is ask for help. I actually have to write it down and repeat it sometimes because it's counterintuitive to my makeup of who I am. I'm fiercely independent and I like to have control. And yet when somebody asks me for help, I feel honored and that it's kind of it's a blessing. And so if I can sort of challenge my own thinking of saying how good it makes me feel to feel needed, that somebody feels that I have expertise and knowledge to help them, it helps give me sort of the spark and the courage to ask for help myself. I also think there is a kind of vulnerability that comes from saying I don't have all the answers, and that that's a hard place, especially when we're struggling with so many different emotions and feelings in this time, to expose ourselves further so that we can have guidance and help. Is courageous in and of itself, is to speak up and say, hey, I need help. But I definitely think that this is a time of giving ourselves grace and self-compassion, and challenging our ways of thinking and moving in a direction that lifts us up in the future And I think this is our time, because we have the time to build relationships around us that help, that will help us in the future, or really now, because we're not talking about the future, we're talking about now.
Yeah. And so as specifically as you're faced with your own sort of business challenges and obviously the business and the personal in terms of what our experiences are and emotions are not separate. How do you see a mentor being helpful? Like what are you able to see anything sort of specific that a mentor could help you with? What might they do to extend help that might feel, sort of welcoming or would be more appealing than not? Any ideas there for our volunteers who?
Well, I think, the primary would be guidance and expertise, is finding somebody who matches, the challenges that I currently have, which would probably be, website traffic, and just by my age, social media drives me nuts, but I participate. But I also think having somebody with a fresh perspective that can kind of look at my business models and point out kind of the blind spots. I also think there are areas that I'm actually aware of where I don't particularly enjoy that aspect of the business. I mean, I kind of have a sweet spot, and I concentrate on those areas that come easy to me.
Yeah.
And then I'm reluctant to I whine a lot when it comes to doing some other things.
Yeah. Don't we all?
I'm really grateful for bookkeepers. I'm like, hallelujah, I don't have to do that. But I think that somebody who seeking out people who can help you, guide you through that pathway in a gentle but firmness, and maybe give little micro steps so that you can kind of reach the goal that you're looking for. And I think a fresh perspective is really important. I think entrepreneurs there's so many things to do every day. You're wearing a lot of different hats, and sometimes we get buried in the details, and we forget to take a step back and kind of look at the road ahead and where we're going. And I think someone who's collaborating with you and helping guide you is kind of that person who kind of sees the forest through the trees. I know that's a cliche, but and it's true. It's truthful. So I think we really we have to lean on one another, and it's really we rise together. We don't rise individually. We rise as a team.
Yeah. Well, I know that people are sort of locked in their homes and trying to figure this out, so they may or may not have someone around them, but hearing a fresh perspective and having somebody who's potentially been there and done that just makes at least I know that we see those stories all the time. So Sandy, I thank you so much for sharing. I know that there's so much more that you can probably give us guidance on, but in the interest of time, I'm going to switch and switch the gears to speaking to one of our mentors on the platform. And please, you're welcome to stay. And if there's other questions that come your way from our guests or panelists, we might throw you curveballs, so Sandy. So hang in there. So Brian, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. For those of you that are joining us in this conversation virtually, Brian is a mentor on the MicroMentor platform for several years, probably 6. I think we're losing count. I don't know. I keep adding and dropping years. Brian also happens to be my mentor, and he's been helping us with thinking through strategy for MicroMentor, as and personally, he's certainly helped me as a professional grow tremendously over the last 2 years. But it's a work in progress, as we know it. So thank you. Thank you for joining us. And thanks for committing so much of your time for MicroMentor and the rest of the team. You know, we heard from Sandy about, you know, some of the challenges. Now I know that there are multiple flavors of what she's experiencing across the globe. We have, you know, small businesses that come to us from over 190 countries. So each country and each region, and I'm sure your mentees yourself are from all over the world. So you know that there's some variety of what Sandy said, maybe, you know, different flavors. You're a mentor, you've been there for several years. What does it, how do you feel like what is the unique position of mentors in this crisis, in this climate? And how do you see the role being same or different, slightly adjusted? What should we be thinking about?
Well, you know, I'm sure everybody could, you know, offer into this perspective, but you know, to me, the big thing that's different now, and Sandy really articulated it, is, you know, most people really critical business issues, but it brings up all this, you know, fear, uncertainty, insecurity, those become almost sort of the presenting issues. I've had lots of folks in the last couple of weeks reach out to me that just wanted to have a conversation, you know, about their business. At least that was the original request. And, you know, and really they needed to talk through how they were feeling, you know, and the effect that this was having on them, sort of personally. And I don't necessarily mean in their personal life, although that's part of it too, but, you know, it does bring up all sorts of concerns that people haven't had to face before. So I've really found that sort of leading with listening has been most and is most important right now. That, you know, often, you know, I know this for myself, and you can probably speak to this better than most. You know, we have a tendency sometimes to want to jump in and solve problems. And, you know, I mean, Sandy articulated it really well. There's a lot that she knows, some of it she avoids, you know, she has a lot of wisdom about her own businesses that to me is really most important to get to first, as opposed to me being the one that thinks I can sort of jump in and solve the problems. I try to work from a coaching model, which assumes that the expertise really resides in the person that you're coaching or mentoring. And then, you know, if I'm sort of on my game, I lag with the recommendations. So it sort of begins with letting the person really sort of exhaust for themselves what they're really facing, what the issues are that might be stopping them right now, and then start to talk about what kind of options they see, what possibilities they could see, and, you know, and where the kind of high leverage action areas are. And, you know, it's sort of at that point, if I'm, you know, I'm trying to reserve myself to kind of at that point really offering, you know, more specific ideas.
Yeah, you know, this is reminding, I mean, what it's bringing up for me, Brian, is in crisis, and we've worked with businesses during crisis before through our MicroMentor intervention, may or may not be through the platform. We responded to the earthquakes in Mexico and worked with small businesses there. And in that context, people who are faced with a challenge like that, really when they're reluctant to seek help, they don't see mentoring as an option necessarily out of what feels, you know, catastrophic. And if they do, they want sort of very specific and immediate help. How are you seeing balancing sort of, you know, what you said, lead with the coaching model, leave the sort of the recommendations and guidance and advice to maybe come a little bit later after you've had the opportunity to sort of let them share that? Because what we see is people saying, can you help me with this specific thing?
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes there is a specific thing that if addressed could be really helpful. And so, you know, address it. But I think, you know, Sandy pointed to, it's good to have someone to talk with who can, you know, help provide a fresh perspective. You know, a lot of times when you're talking about particularly things like pivoting a business model, thinking differently about how you're going to operate, negotiating with vendors, those sorts of things. You can get really sort of, wrapped around your own axle, as it would be. And so, I find a lot of times people will, and I mean, I can relate to this myself. You think the issue is something, and when you can sort of step back and take a broader view, there might be lots of other opportunities for action. And it might be the thing that's in your side, or it might be, as Sandy was pointing to, it might be the area that you're most comfortable working. And so you'd identify that as the place to take action right now, when maybe the real critical needs are in the spots that you like to avoid. And that's where having someone to talk to can be, helpful to kind of, point it out and maybe even be your partner in accountability to get you moving in a direction that's, So I mean, I think everybody kind of knows this in some way or another, but it's a balancing act. And I just, I find in times of crisis, the first inclination is not always the best one, for action. And it's not to disregard it, but it can be very helpful to just spend some time and really kind of look across the, sort of take stock before really diving back in.
Yeah, actually, we have one of our panelists, one of our guests telling us that difficulties, many entrepreneurs are actually introverted, though they appear extroverted. Especially, they want to show a strong exterior and do not want to tell others about their crisis. So I think that's very true, because as a small business owner, and as a leader, even personally speaking, I think the expectation is to be strong. The expectation is to figure it out and be able to answer the questions or know what to do. But I mean, it's not reality for anyone.
No, I think it's a great point. And to me, what I think as BJ is saying is like, people need to be met, right? They need to be met where they are, and that's the place you can go to work. And so, for me, I try to check myself. Is this feeling more like my agenda or their agenda? And how am I doing in that balance?
Speaking of that, Brian, how is it feeling personally for you at this time? Like, are you having any? I mean, I know this is a crisis that's affecting all of us, not just the small business owners. So, how do you feel in your role as a mentor? And how are you taking care of yourself? And I just would like that sort of self-awareness to exist on both sides. And
I appreciate that. We're lucky. I'm retired, as you know, and so honestly, being sequestered, it's affected me a lot less than folks who get up and go to work in an office every day. But I think as a mentor, it definitely has brought up questions for me of, do I have what it takes, sort of, like functional expertise to offer someone when their business is really in crisis. I haven't done that thing. And the truth is that I have run a business. I was running a business during the financial crisis. And so, I have to manage my own stuff to make sure that doesn't get in the way of me offering myself to folks who have needs, because being a mentor is not always about being the expert.
Right.
And it's important to remember that.
Yeah.
So.
And, we've talked about, and this came up even yesterday in the conversation, is that this is a community as much for the mentors as it is for the entrepreneurs. And potentially there could be experts that, in our mentor community, that if they're, I think if we sort of, made that more part of the dialogue and the conversation and the way things work, is that you're also able to reach out to mentors and be like, hey, I think I found somebody who is that subject matter expert, or you should go look for this one, or something like that feels appropriate, because not everybody needs to have all the answers. And
Right. And I do, I am, I'm very comfortable telling people that, what they're asking for is not sort of in my sweet spot. And, my sort of standard line is, thankfully, there are a lot of really talented folks on the platform, so I'm sure you'll find a good match. But I think that, there is an opportunity there to sort of extend that. How could we have more visibility into what people have to offer?
Right.
The gifts, and maybe, as you were talking earlier, some of the frameworks and approaches that could be helpful, that could be resourced, whether we learn it from each other or we can connect people virtually, I think could be really valuable for the entrepreneurs and valuable for us.
Exactly. And, this came up yesterday in our conversation. I know that there are people on the call today as well. We have Ken Larson on the as one of our guests, who's been with us for several years, worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs, has created frameworks and his own website to support small business owners. You have your own framework that you use, Brian, when you work with us. Yesterday, Jim mentioned he has his own sort of framework. We know that there are lots of, mentors have their own framework. So I think collective wisdom is also helpful, being able to share each other's ideas. I know that one of the questions that's come up is that this non-responsiveness from mentees and entrepreneurs. So one advice I have for the group is that, in the MicroMentor community, we see the whole gamut. We see the people that are in the business and in the thick of it and really dealing with specific challenges. And then we also see the ones that are early on and potentially, just sort of curious and kicking the tires as well. At least in this crisis, I would definitely encourage you to go with reach out to businesses that already have an established business and are having the real challenges that, of that business shutting down or really facing a critical problem. Not that that guarantees that, you'll get a response from them, because at the end of the day, that's sort of left up to that individual. And we are working from a MicroMentor perspective as well to see how we can somehow provide that journey to be more optimal, so you're able to connect with the people that are well suited for the stage of business that you want to support. So that's certainly coming up. But any other advice you have on people that just, flake, for lack of a better word?
Well, I've told you this. I don't tend to work with folks who are at the early stage, who are in the what for me is the idea stage, just because I've found historically that they don't tend to, the percentage that stick is very low. And my preference is to have more sustained relationships. So, I'm probably not, that's how I deal with it. So I may not be
that's how you deal with it.
I may not have the most experience.
Yeah. Well, there's certainly things coming up in our chat box. So I'll make sure that we are responding to that. Brian, thank you so much. Please stick around, because I think things will come up. I want to make sure that, we're able to share with you few things that I think are sort of important at this time before we open it up and see if there's advice, and folks that are joining us virtually are able to join, maybe want to share something that that they're seeing in their countries, because we have people from several countries represented in our conversation today. We know that small business owners, the universe of businesses that are struggling with this don't exist on MicroMentor. So if you know of networks, if you know of people that could use the help, please offer MicroMentor as a resource, share that amongst your communities. More importantly, we do know that there are friends and peer groups and maybe professional networks that you're part of, where you can make a call out to join MicroMentor as a volunteer. We certainly are, if we're making strides towards supporting our 100,000 businesses, we need all the volunteers we can get. So please do promote that. We'll share that information with you as to how we'll make it easy, and then you can personalize it. So we'll send you content that can be tweeted or sent in a message via email or posted on Facebook or whatever. And like I said before, please reach out to other entrepreneurs that you've worked with in the past. And while you may or may not get a response. I think knowing that somebody is out there, if you're able to send a message and personally reach out to small business owners, that would be really, really helpful. I want to make sure that I'm not missing any sort of, information that I was supposed to share as a slide. And Sam, okay, so we did have a question for our audience. And Sam, do you want to take it away for the poll and how this works?
Sure thing. Hello, everyone. Sam Roy here from the MicroMentor team. We heard a lot from Sandy in terms of the perspective of an entrepreneur, as well as kind of the exact experience Brian's having here in the midst of this crisis. But we wanted to hear from you, our mentor task force, about the skills that you feel you're able to bring to a mentoring relationship. So you should see a poll on your screen right now. Take a minute or two to answer this poll and kind of select all of the areas where you think you could help. This will just be really helpful for us, and I think kind of pull back the curtain a little bit in terms of who we've got on the line here. So just take a moment.
Great. Will that just pop up on our screen?
I believe maybe if Anita, you stop sharing your screen, I'm seeing that the poll is in progress.
Okay, I don't, yeah, because I wasn't able to see it. Brian, are you seeing it?
No.
Okay, let me try to relaunch it.
And while Sam is doing that, if there's anybody who's joining us as an attendee who has something that you'd like to share with the whole group, please use that hand raising feature on the webinar, and we can promote you to a panelist and hear from you directly. So please let us know if anything in this conversation sparked any ideas, things that you'd like to share. Please use that hand raising feature. I haven't used it myself, but I think that you should find it somehow. Okay.
Looks like
yeah. Should we just, Sam, I'll let you do that because I don't want to mess it up. So if the poll is taking a bit, why don't we just jump into conversation that I'd rather hear directly from folks.
Okay, perfect.
Hi, Vijay. Please feel free to turn your video on if you're comfortable. It'll be great to see you as well as hear you.
The video button is, I don't see it right now.
Okay.
Okay, I don't know. This is it. I don't find it. Okay.
It's okay. So, that's all right. Let's.
Yeah, you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I think it's a great conversation going on. And, I myself and our team has been an entrepreneur. We started 25 years ago, so we have been through a few crises ourselves. So, and especially the place where we are right now in Cochin, Kerala, we've had 3 straight years of crisis, 2 years of floods, we had Nipah, etc. So a lot of entrepreneurs have been through these challenges. We ourselves had been through challenges in our earlier years also, when business challenges, the recession took place, dot-com boom took place. So I think we have placed ourselves in a way that we are able to take care of it today with about 250 employees in Cochin and about 300-400 in the US. We are able to work, almost everybody's working from home. I myself work from home. Most of the team is working from home. There are a few people who are supporting some key organizations. So we are able to do that. That said, I think, like I said, in the chat I had mentioned, one of the things that people find is when you are in a crisis, you are expected to be a leader. You do not want to showcase that you are fearing. You have a fear, and so you try not to reach out. Or sometimes you reach out only when you are in an urgent crisis, and you actually cannot see anything beyond that crisis. So like Brian was mentioning, you know, if you try to address that, sometimes it is necessary to address that. You need to perhaps take a look from step back and address that. But sometimes it is important to try to get the mentee also to step back and look, is this important, or should I address it in some other way? What are the other things which are possible, or how do I ensure at least, because I don't know, for example, if 10 companies ask, or if I look at what the companies which are in an issue today are finding difficult to address, if they ask me what they can do to survive for the next 3 months, I'm not sure I can give them any solutions. But what I can tell them is what I have learned, that to be ready for the business which will definitely come back after that 3 months, to be ready for the next crisis which definitely will come back perhaps in 3 years or faster. Okay, so those are the things, and again, ensuring that you have systems in place. Say, for example, today we are able to do this because maybe 2 years ago when the floods hit Kerala, we had almost 1 month where we could not go to office. All of us were safe, but nobody could go to office because it's all flooded out, and we had to work from home. So we set in systems, even though we know that perhaps with 200 people working from different places and accessing systems in the office, it's going to put a lot of load on the network. We have been able to move systems so that it works. Of course, I'm in the IT industry, so it is somewhat easier. Today, more and more businesses are becoming reliant on IT, and so can you look at something like that?
So sort of preparedness for the next crisis.
Yes, preparedness for the crisis. Similarly, the cash flow management is something which personally I'm pretty bad at that, but I realize that is very important, and I'm very thankful that I have partners who are extremely strong at that. I leave it to them, but I know that cash flow management has to be something which is well thought of, not at the time of the crisis. It has to be right from the beginning of the crisis. You can have loans, you can have people, venture capitalists. We are a bit weak on that. We are completely self-funded, and we have grown organically. But then that again adds to the crisis sometimes. So you have to be very careful about what your funding sources are, what your payments are, what your collectibles are, ensuring that collections are coming on time. And that has to be a discipline which is not at the time of the crisis. It has to be during the good period also, in which case you can tide over crisis better. Of course, saying that now does not make sense to these people, but what could help is that helping them to set that up and ensure that they're not sitting idle. One of the biggest things is that if people are sitting idle, they're seeing that there is no order books, their customers are in trouble, their customers are not able to place orders, their payments are getting delayed. People get into a negative and cynical mode. So I think one of the things which we can help these people is to prepare for the next crisis. And preparing for the next crisis, I think, gives them also an insight how they can, do their business better. I think that should be one focus I can contribute right now.
Yeah.
Of course, other things maybe we can think and we can discuss over time.
Great, thank you, Vijay. I know that we have Sam. Are we still going to try on the poll, or should we give up on that? I know that we have folks who are either ready to share Do we have anyone else that's ready to share, Sam?
So with regards to the poll, it's not delivering. So I think there is a good question that we could address here now.
And then we have
Q&A.
Ken who has his hand up as well. So I'm just going to promote Ken to be able to share. And the question on the chat is,
should we generate a similar experience to entrepreneurs during this COVID crisis, maybe with a general framework? And this, I think, is actually a great question for you, Ken, as you were kind of talking about working through the small business loan, U.S. small business loan application process. So over to you, Ken.
hi, Ken. We can't hear you if you're speaking. So, Ken, we're still not able to hear you.
Brian, I don't know if you want to weigh in the interim in terms of using a similar kind of experience or general framework.
You mean the webinar sort of interface? What was the question specifically, Sam?
The question's around
on what the exact question is, Sam.
Should we generate a similar experience for working with entrepreneurs during this crisis, maybe with a general framework? So in terms of when you're working with entrepreneurs, are you replicating a process?
I mean, I guess I think the question to me speaks to kind of, if I think of it broadly, are there resources that we could be providing to each other that could be useful at times like this? You know, I didn't see the question specifically, so you'll have to tell me if that's close. But and I think that would be really useful. You know, if we as mentors who have more experience, and a lot of folks, you know, have consulting practices and things that they have practices and processes that they work with that are effective. I mean, I certainly am interested in learning more about how people work with folks, and you know, when they have to reevaluate strategy and decide what to do. So I think that would be incredibly useful.
Yeah. Well, I know that we're at time, and I want to respect those who might have other things going on, or it's late at night for people in different countries that they're calling in from. So want to thank Sandy and Brian. Thank you so much for your time, and all of the mentors who joined us today. It's such an honor to have you as part of the community, and this community is made up of you. You know, MicroMentor we facilitate this, but you know, it wouldn't be possible without the people that actually make it happen. So please share with us ways that we can allow you to engage further, you know, tools and frameworks that you think that might be helpful to share, whatever we can do right now to get more conversations happening, more connections happening, more mentoring to take place. That's what the MicroMentor team is committed to, and we're passionate about this, but we don't have all the answers. The answers actually rest with the mentor community and our entrepreneurs. So please share with us. And I hope that this conversation is just the beginning, and we can continue to have more of this and more opportunities for us to hear from each other. And last but not the least, I would encourage you to please reach out to small business owners, reach out to entrepreneurs. If you need to update your profile to reflect something that might be calling out to the current need, and narrowing it down to the 3 things that you think businesses might find helpful, I encourage you to do that. So that's sort of the last sort of call to action here is share the word, reach out to small business owners. That's sort of the best thing I think we can do at the moment. Anything I missed, Sam, that we should share with our guests and mentors?
No, just that we're following up with opportunities for you to contribute to any resources that you think might be helpful for the larger community. And just thanks so much for your continued support in our efforts to support small businesses.
Great. And Vijay, thank you for sharing your experience with us as well. And we'll try to find a way to keep this dialogue going even in the future. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.